We still got 2 more speakers we're waiting on, and then we can get the show on the road. Hey there, Andrea. I know you're just spectating, but I'm going to pull you up as a speaker anyway, just in case. What's up, Donnie? I grab you as well. I know some of you guys aren't official panel members, but I figured I'd pull you up anyway. Still waiting on 2 guests from Constellation, and then we can get started. So just hang tight, guys.
Hi, this is Altif, subbing in for Andrea right now.
Oh, right on. What's up, Altif?
Yeah, so I won't be from my personal account.
Welcome.
I'll just be from our company account.
Sure, no worries. I think we're waiting for 1 more guy, and then we will. Oh, there we go. Wyatt. Welcome, Wyatt.
Hello, Wyatt.
Hey, what's going on?
Can you hear us? Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome. Okay, everybody, welcome to. Oh, we got Kyle. Almost forgot Kyle. Kyle, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hey, Kyle.
What's up,
You there?
Yep.
What's up, man? Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
All right, everyone. Thanks for being here. Welcome to Whalecoin Talk's first virtual roundtable. I thought it'd be a great time to discuss the implications of the merge, proof of work versus proof of stake, hence the title. Before we get started, we have 4 lovely panelists, and if you guys don't mind, give us a quick, very brief introduction of who you are, and then we can get starting, and then we can get talking about the merge and all the things that are coming with it. So Kyle, let's start with you first.
Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Kyle Chasse. I CEO, founder, Master Ventures, and Paid Network, and some upcoming stealth things. Yeah, I've been in crypto for 10 years, and been passionate about adoption. Ever since I kind of went down the rabbit hole. Yep, that's high level.
Great. Let's go with Peter next.
Hey, folks. Thanks for having me. My name is Peter Bryce. I'm an attorney. My practice previously focused on litigation related to mergers and acquisitions and federal investigations. And currently, I am the Director of Legal Operations at EverRise.
Beautiful. Next up, Joe.
Hey guys, Joe Reben here. I've been in crypto for a while now as well. Started my own firm in 2015, law firm focused on compliance, regulatory, and business and tax structuring for crypto companies on a global scale out of Denver, Colorado. And also the CEO of Mandala Exchange, which was the first Binance Cloud white label exchange. Been doing that for a few years now. So yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks, guys.
And
you have
what?
Did you have a bunch of cult at one time?
Me?
Yeah, whoever was a Mandala exchange.
Oh, we were talking to them, but we haven't moved forward with anything, or we didn't move forward.
There was a
Yep.
wallet that was staking a bunch. It was Mandala.eth, I think. I guess not you.
Nah, definitely not. Yeah, we run everything on exchange and through Binance's infrastructure.
Roger. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Let's go with Wyatt, and last but not least, Altif.
Hey, Wyatt here with Altif from Constellation. And I'll let Altif talk for himself. I'm the creator of HTTP.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm Wyatt's co-founder of Constellation Network, and I lead our global community within throughout the 91 countries where we are.
Awesome. So, gentlemen, the way I'm going to do it is I'll ask questions, and that'll probably spark more questions, and it'll lead to kind of a free-flowing debate. But feel free to uncue your mic when you want to talk. If you want to raise your hand before you talk, you can do that. It's very unstructured, and I want everyone to just have a good time and share their insights and professional opinions. So, without further ado, first question: what do you guys believe? What implications do you guys believe the merge has on Ethereum? Alternative layer ones, and the space as a whole? I think let's start with Joe. Joe first.
Man, you're gonna kick me off there. That's fine. Without giving any background on the merge, too, huh? I mean, it's pretty, significant bellwether event for the space, really. Just short little background on what the merge is. I'm sure you guys will fill it in too. It's addressing obviously each blockchain has a trilemma, right? Just for a little bit of background, we look at scalability, security, and decentralization of a blockchain. Now, and an ecosystem for that matter. Ethereum has always been great with, security and decentralization. Scalability being the major obstacle, right? Their main net for the past few years has been running between 15 and 18 transactions per second at any time, and it's very slow for modern blockchains, right? That's why we see these other projects like Solana, like, just for example, that process these tens of thousands of transactions per second when the network's working. Let's make sure that that's noted, because the network's always down and it's not really scaling well either. But the beacon chain, or this merge to basically ETH 2.0, is addressing that scalability by going from proof of work to proof of stake. I guess a little bit what I think, just to start, is I'm really impressed with how they've merged really on the fly. Obviously, I didn't stick to any of their time schedules, because they've been saying this merge is going to happen for a couple of years now. But their developers are world class, and I'm sure that they're putting out a product that's been properly tested and properly developed, right? And they're doing it piece by piece, while we're still waiting for other upgrades that we'll get into in 2023 and beyond. It's really nice to see them going from proof of work to proof of stake, because it does improve that scalability and that transaction speed. And it allows for more data storage as well, which I'm sure you guys will go into. So yeah, those are my opening thoughts and a little bit of background on what the merge actually is. Somebody else take over.
Thanks, Joe, for that. Thanks, Joe, for that background. My apologies, audience members, for assuming. I figured this. I'm so ingrained in this space that I just assume everyone else knows what the merge is. But let's go with Kyle next. Kyle, what do you think the implications of the merge are on Ethereum, alternative layer ones, and on the space as a whole?
Well, I think that I feel like there was a lot of politics into this thing, and I think if you listen to like Vitalik himself, and talking about like the big blocks versus small block debate, listen to him on Lex Friedman or whatever, that he's not really happy with the way that things went down. We can scale on chain layer one by increasing block size, decreasing block time, and then you have scaling, right? Like it's pretty simple to scale on layer one on proof of work, and proof of work is secure. It's been battle tested. Proof of stake hasn't battle tested, and I think it's like the biggest experiment that's ever went down in crypto history to move ETH to a proof of stake blockchain. In my opinion, it's a huge gamble. I don't think that. I think if you asked Vitalik himself, he probably would not have been a fan of it. I think that he felt somewhat of a pressure to do that with this whole like ESG thing and all this green stuff and all the pressure that people put on proof of work chains, you know, my argument is always like, if there's one thing that's worth spending energy on, it's like a sovereign currency and a sovereign, you know, world computer. So, you know, I made a video, if any of you guys, you know, haven't seen it yet, it's on my YouTube channel, it's just my name, about the possible exploit that could go down on a proof of stake chain, like Ethereum now, how one could attack it. You know, I laid it out pretty clear. I even had like a quick debate with Richard Hart about this. That, you know, like essentially, but my thing is that it just what the fuck are we doing? Seriously, it would just take a malicious actor to essentially create another Lido that has a higher APY. Even if like a bad actor that has a lot of money could just, you know, pay out of pocket, you know, higher APY, attract all of the kind of yield farmers over to their you know, delegated staking protocol, and then they could attack the network if they wanted to. They could open up a huge short on Ethereum, do something to break the trust of the network, and the price would crash, and it would be detrimental to the Ethereum network. I personally think it was a mistake. Not stoked on it, but it is what it is.
Sorry to interrupt you, Kyle, but in a big room like this, I think a definition of terms is always a good idea. Can you tell us what a Lido is?
Yeah, so it's a staking platform where you can delegate your ETH. Like if you don't have 32 ETH or the competency to run your own node, you could just delegate it to a staking pool. So whether, you know, you can do a fraction of an ETH or, you know, 32 ETH or whatever, and they will gladly stake it on your behalf. Yeah, that's what it is. That's what Lido is.
Right on. And Altif, Wyatt, do you guys have some insights on this?
I will pass that off to Wyatt. I'm just kind of in the background for today right now.
Sure.
So, I mean, you touched on something really interesting around like the block wars. I mean, so we talk about like the size of a block as though somehow that's going to speed up transaction time, but like really like the problem here is like how quickly can you actually perform consensus? If you increase a block size by like X amount, sure, maybe you'll increase like the amount of transactions from the mempool that get processed, but that doesn't take into account any of the network effects or the, you know, potential delays or sorry, like network issues. So like the issue here is that when you send a large amount of data over a network, that you have to try and send small chunks of that data in order to basically get it through across to all the other machines. And so that's like a really huge problem that takes a lot of like, it's very computationally intensive and it's also quite slow. So there's tools out there to try and speed up this process, but like the bottom line here is that the only way you can truly actually like scale is to make consensus parallel. Like this, thinking about consensus, or rather thinking about you know, block time or sorry, transaction processing time as being tied to the block size is a moot point and frankly incorrect in my opinion.
Are you talking about parallel processing transactions like Solana, Aptos, Sui kind of things, or what are you talking about?
So, I mean, literally just running multiple consensus rounds. If you have an entire distributed system that's waiting on one process, then you have an entire distributed system operating in serial, or like you don't have any of the benefits of like parallelism or, you know, basically writing like we have a network that runs consensus to, well, instead of thinking about like, you know, there being like a consensus network, it's a network of consensus, then I think we can actually start to get the same gains that you see in Web 2 in Web 3.
Okay, so a follow-up question I have is that a lot of people argue that without the merge, without the move from proof of work to proof of stake, Ethereum ultimately could not achieve sharding, and sharding will ultimately allow Ethereum to become a layer of proofs, and all transactions, whether that's DeFi transactions, whether that's NFT transactions, whether that's crypto gaming transactions, will happen on highly efficient layer 2 rollups. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I'll just jump in there. My question is, whatever happened to Plasma? I mean, Vitalik was talking about like actually like running like parallel consensus years ago, but I'm kind of curious where that happened. I hear them talking about like sharding, but that really only kind of represents like the data storage layer kind of problem, right? I mean, like at the end of the day, you have a global settlement layer that's waiting for subsets of the total ledger state to come to consensus on, right? And if you can't figure out a way to, parallelize that, then I don't know. I mean, it's almost like we're making, there's small improvements, but like if we really want to see like how to scale consensus, then I think honestly looking at how like I don't know HDFS, does something similar to consensus to figure out its own what are called partitions, similar to shards. This is just like a tool in like the large scale computing space, but yeah, throw that out there.
I think I might be speaking for the folks that have no idea what the heck is going on up here, because I have a lot of questions. A lot of people, I hear the word parallelism a lot in this conversation. Can somebody fill us in on what that actually means in this context?
Yeah, Wyatt, do you have a...
Yeah, totally. So
go ahead.
Yeah, so basically, like when we talk about like high performance computing or whatnot, what we're really doing is we're figuring out how we can stack a bunch of computers together to basically almost like horses pulling a cart. And so when I mean computers, I mean CPUs technically, but basically just like whatever actually does stuff inside of your box. So if we want to try and get something to be done faster, then one strategy to doing that is to write something in what's called like a parallel or a concurrent way. And so what we do is we basically stack a bunch of horses in front of the cart, and then thus they can pull more and move faster.
I'm good. I'm a little bit curious about why you think that that you can't scale using proof of work by simply increasing block size and decreasing block times. You look at like Starcoin, for example, which is a new proof of work chain that has near instant finality on a proof of work chain. And then if you look at the block debates, even Vitalik was for big blocks, right? Like as far as a way of scaling, I mean, literally you can fit the entire mempool in a block. And the argument back 5 years ago was that storage is expensive, right? And like so then the argument was, okay, well now we're going to take away the opportunity for decentralization because like who can afford 4 terabytes of storage or something like that. But like as storage becomes more cheap, many more people can run full nodes because it's more affordable. It kind of keep it correlated to the cost of storage. It might make sense, especially because at the rate at which storage is becoming more cheap.
Sure. And, I don't really think it's a storage problem. I mean, like what we're talking about is sending data over network. And so like if you have a huge file, like a terabyte of data or something, I don't know, and you want to send that from one computer to another, like it's going to take quite a lot of time and quite a lot of computational like resources without getting into the specifics. And so essentially your machines just get like beefier and beefier just trying to actually get the result of consensus. And so what's going to happen is that it's going to become even harder now for downstream applications like these L2s that they talk about in order to just actually take in the data, process all of it, and then update something in real time. Typically that works a lot better when you have smaller chunks and you don't have, basically issues that happen with any kind of distributed system due to just like network partitions, we call them. But I mean, I do think it's an improvement. Absolutely. I do think proof of work is definitely stake is definitely, it's going to speed things up compared to proof of work. But like a lot of these, I think we're all just kind of starting to realize that like consensus, isn't really like, it's not a totally new problem. And there are solutions that have been out there for a long time. And I think we're just sort of rediscovering what a lot of heroes in the past, the giants have left for us that we stand on or something. I don't know. You guys know that saying.
But no one's sending a terabyte of data over a blockchain. Like transaction sizes are kilobytes, not terabytes.
Sure.
So like the example that you gave just isn't relevant at any blockchain today. So I just would like to hear something that like is actually relevant to transaction sizes.
Okay. Well, what do you mean specifically? So like, yeah, I mean, obviously, like in terms of like what is the size of a block, a terabyte is like, it's not a real example, but just in general, like when we start to increase the size of the data, like we start to have these downstream issues, and I don't think there's necessarily like, look, once again, I'm not saying there's a problem, but that like in the future when scalability issues do come up, I think it might come from increased block sizes or just large units of data that are trying to get processed by these chains.
Yeah, so like if we could back up for a second and just come back to the topic of today's discussion, I just personally, as a bad, I heard anyone with any logic of why still it was a good move to proof of stake.
So let's talk about the energy efficiency, right? And I've been reading. So I've been digesting a lot of material on both, and to the point where I'm confused because material that is for proof of work, it makes very great arguments as to why proof of work is the way to go, and then material that writes about proof of stake does the exact opposite, which is why I decided I wanted to have a spaces about this topic just to get more insights and get a better understanding. But I hear the energy efficiency. I hear that energy efficiency is a huge thing, and with proof of stake, there's not the need for lots of energy, lots of big mining rigs, and using as much energy as small countries, right? You just need what for a validator, you need an execution client, a consensus client, and a validator, and that's not really hard to get together. So, I mean, panelists, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, if I could jump in here, let's start with where are you domiciled, right? And what's your views on energy consumption and how it affects the climate? First, because there are a lot of countries that do care about it and are leaders in green energy technologies, and there are some that really give zero, what's. So I think that's where we start. But, obviously with proof of work, you need to set up, mining operations to do your computations, to do your calculations. It does expend a lot more energy than, of course, a proof of stake model. Just for laymen that may not understand the difference out there, right? Obviously, proof of work, you have, like you've seen, these big rigs. I mean, I own a few different mining facilities myself around the U.S. And it's one of those things that, yeah, there's a barrier of cost to entry, and there is definitely energy considerations, whether it's electricity concerns, how much you're paying for electricity, whether it is the climate that's around you. I mean, I have a place in Oklahoma and a place in Minnesota, and the place in Minnesota uses a lot less energy in the winter for obvious reasons. Just temperate climate, and there's other things that factor in. But I think overall, obviously, like you were saying, the proof of stake argument, you do not have the carbon footprint that you do with a proof of work model in general. Now, of course, there is a counter argument to that is true, somewhat for proof of work advocates, and that is, you see a lot of energy that's wasted anyway today, right? So if you're repurposing that energy and using it for something constructive like mining, how much are you actually wasting? That is a counterbalancing argument, but it is a fascinating debate. I think you're exactly right. No, it's a great debate, and it's one that's going to continue to go on as long as there are proof of work and proof of stake chains out there.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And I think, of course, we should always do well to remember the difference between Bitcoin and everything else, right? Like anybody who likes Bitcoin even a little bit, I think would be kind of horrified if Bitcoin moved over to proof of stake, simply because Bitcoin itself is considered, whether you want to call it money or a financial instrument or a store of value, it's tracking value. It's tracking purchasing power across the globe. And anything that tracks money needs to touch the physical world in some sense. So it's good that it costs resources to mine Bitcoin. Now, when we talk about Ethereum, which is kind of setting the groundwork for creating smart contracts and creating kind of computer systems that are based on our imagination and our ability to create, you can see a world where if Ethereum is setting the groundwork there to be proof of work or proof of stake, the amount of smart contracts and blockchains are essentially infinite. So if we have a world where all of that becomes proof of work, maybe it's not so necessary to have that be touching the physical world in a way it is when everybody agrees that Bitcoin is some kind of financial instrument, where it's so important, in other words, to have that touch the physical world. Otherwise, you end up with inflation. But Ethereum represents something different. And so I'm not sure that the urgency for proof of work there is the same as it would be for Bitcoin, for instance.
I think if I could add something here, it's just that someone hasn't touched on yet. Well, yeah, like I think the point that was made earlier about the unused energy that's that can be captured, for example, like the natural gas that gets burnt off into the atmosphere from oil wells, for example, or volcanoes or whatever the case may be. Like, but the whole logic behind mining is that the most efficient miners will win at the end of the day, right? So like that's why you see people setting up mining rigs near energy resources like dams or volcanoes or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, like you have to be efficient as a miner to remain competitive, and so that this naturally forces people to find the cheapest way to mine, and that obviously is spending as little as possible on coal burning types of energy sources. So it's just a matter of time before essentially all Bitcoin mining is done on renewable energy. I don't know that it's going to happen in the next 5 years, but certainly in like 10 years or something like that, most likely that'll be the case. And that would be the same case for any type of energy production on the planet. Right now, we don't have super efficient renewable energy sources, right? But actually, like if we could hook up to nuclear plants or something like that, that'd be fantastic, right? So like this whole thing about energy really kind of frustrates me because you do get a lot of people who quote how energy intensive it is, but then like Bitcoin mining takes up less energy than dryers, right? Like dryers that people run in their home to dry their clothes. So I mean, what is more valuable to our population? Is it ability to dry our clothes? Like, should we just say, oh well, drying clothes takes up a lot of energy, so we shouldn't allow that anymore? Or is it like having a truly sovereign financial currency and smart contract platform, like to me, that's something that's worth spending energy on.
That's a great point, Kyle. And it's always a question of alternatives, right? Like, to your point, like, it's not even a question of drying clothes. Like, we can dry our clothes without energy at all. We could all just get our clotheslines and then hang them out in the wind. So the same thing goes for Bitcoin. There are alternatives, but you have to weigh the function in light of its alternatives. What is the alternative to the financial system promulgated by Bitcoin? We know what it is in this case, and it's super energy intensive. It's all the centralized banks, it's all the centralized institutions printing this money, supporting industries that are energy inefficient. And so when you weigh things against their options, then you start to see exactly what you said. Like, it's not as high a cost as one random source saying like, oh, same energy cost as Sweden, for instance. I mean, that's just kind of it doesn't really mean anything unless you evaluate it against the other possibilities.
Yeah, and that was a good point too. I'll just drive that home again. Like central banking system, SWIFT, for example, like all this takes up way more energy than Bitcoin does. So like you have the people's currency, right, and then like the central bank's currency, and so like we should definitely be fighting for something that like gives us sovereignty. And again, coming back to the point of the debate is like I just think switching to proof of stake is a huge gamble, and I hope it goes well. I just don't know if it was the right thing to do.
So I'm going to add to that. That proof of work does require real world inputs, and the cost of electricity breeds innovation as mining service providers find novel ways, as several of you have mentioned, to mine and harness electricity as cheaply as possible. So whether it's working with landfills and gas companies to harness and cap methane and wasted gas resources using renewable energy like wind, solar, water, reducing, and eventually, I believe that most Bitcoin mining will contribute towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions based on what I've read. Now, I'm going to flip this around and also add that the variable costs are also a blessing because proof of stakeholders, they stake their Ethereum. They might have to pay taxes on the income, but proof of work miners actually have to dump their Bitcoin onto the market for expenditures, and that ensures a relatively more consistent distribution of coins. So my next question leads to my next question, which is, do you guys believe that this will eventually cause Ethereum to become more and more centralized as a whole? I mean, people make the argument that, oh, it's so much more expensive to start a Bitcoin mining operation than to stake, spin up a validator. But as of now, spinning up your own validator, 32 Ethereum, is about, I don't know, almost $40,000. I don't know how much of the world population can actually afford to do that.
The Ethereum,
Yeah.
if you look at Ethereum right now, highly centralized. Like I forget, it's highly centralized. Like the Lido has like 32% of the entire stake. And I think Vitalik said that on Ethereum's proof of stake, it's 33% to attack the network. So like,
I haven't been able to find that anywhere though, Kyle. You did mention that on Mario's, and I'm not saying that he didn't say that, but I have been trying to find that, and everywhere that I've looked, it still said you need a 51% control in order to do a network attack.
Yeah, I'll try to find it. I think I was listening to him on if you look at Lex Friedman's podcast with Vitalik, where he specifically talks about proof of stake versus proof of work. He mentions it. So I always thought it was a 51% attack too, but I thought it was weird that he said this on Lex Friedman. So yeah, I actually don't know to be clear. But regardless, if you look at the amount of the staking pools right now, it is, it only takes a couple pools to overtake the network, right? Like, so yeah, to your point, it is incredibly centralized. And at least and then people's argument on Bitcoin being centralized, they usually look at countries, which doesn't make any sense to me. They say, oh, like China or US or whatever has a majority of a huge amount of the network. But it's like, I don't think that's right to assume that a country, just because you've got individual mining operations happening in the country, doesn't mean that the country itself, right? Like that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, no, Ethereum right now is looking highly centralized.
Yeah, if I could, I agree with you with the point that people make about where mining operations are central to different countries. Because I mean, look at America; it's a capitalist society, right? Where there are mining pools that are against each other. They're not all suddenly going to team up and attack a Bitcoin network. We all know that. That doesn't make any sense at all. And most of these mining operations have a very small percentage in the grand scheme of things, most of them, of what's being mined on the network. So I do agree with you that there is some element of centralization. However, here's the thing. Obviously, we're also in a bear market right now, so this is an interesting time to flip the proof of stake, right? So it's the barrier to entry is less than it would be in a bull market, or it will be in the next bull run as well. So I think as we move towards the next bull cycle, and as people are allowed to unstake their ETH, I'm sure that when the Shanghai upgrade gets implemented at some point here, people are allowed to unstake from the network. Not pooled networks, by the way, just the actual network that people have staked their 32 ETH on. Let's be clear about that. I think we'll see more trading in the markets, right, as we usually do in a bull run. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how that affects the centralization of ETH. But right now, I think it still takes some pretty deep pockets and for a 51% attack, which is what I always assumed it was also, and some really, I guess, nothing else to say other than bad actors or people that are hungry for power to want to do this, right? So it's an interesting, like you said, experiment.
Stake their ETH because it means that it's locked and they don't have the option to unstake it. So that's also something to consider. I've read various places, and this is something that I'm still not able to find a concrete answer on, that because most people aren't going to spin up their own node, not just because of the 32 ETH requirement, but because of the hardware requirements as well. Even though they're relatively cheap, they're very strict rules in order to avoid getting slashed. And one of those rules is as simple as your internet staying up, right? If your internet goes down for a certain period of time, you're likely to get slashed. And so people are going to be more incentivized, because it's easier to stake with one of these bigger pools and services like Lido, like Coinbase, like Binance. And from what I'm being told, that means those entities have the voting rights. And it doesn't really make sense to me that would be the case, but this is what I'm being told. So if if that does happen, if staking supply does become more and more centralized, would it not be easier for governments to co-op and censor, essentially, vote to omit certain blocks, kind of like what we saw with Tornado Cash?
Yeah, not only could they omit blocks, but I mean, it could get even more dystopian than that, right? Like emitting blocks would be would be a something we could all live with, I guess, but we wouldn't want to, but you could. But I think that like if it gets, you said with Tornado Cash, like they just decided that that wasn't going to exist in the world, and so they could just take it down. If things get to a place where decentralization becomes so efficient and so user friendly that it literally starts disrupting things like banks, institutions, central banks, and the entire power structure that has existed for the past like 250 years or whatever, I don't know that that's going to go over well. And I don't know how much they'll tolerate that, right? And so, like, to your point, yeah, they can censor blocks, but I think they can do a lot more damage than that if that scenario plays out.
I think we'd also always kind of, again, this is the same thing I said before, but Bitcoin is still different than everything else. Like Ethereum and everything else, that comes after it is in a way going to be aimed at being a tool of supporting, in some ways, institutional actors. This is why there are Bitcoin maximalists in the first place, right? Like Bitcoin is the revolution. Bitcoin is something that's decentralizing everything and making the financial model work for the people. Whereas Ethereum and various smart contract providers are going to exist at the service of whoever adopts the technology. So, there's going to be some flexibility in the way Ethereum and other layer one blockchains are used. And so I think there will be kind of a way for governments and private entities to work in such a way that Ethereum and other blockchains are not disrupting those industries in a way that Bitcoin might.
So let me follow up with this question based on what you just said, Peter. Once Ethereum introduces sharding, and once, as I mentioned earlier, we do start to see more of not just optimistic rollups, but ultimately ZK rollups, which Vitalik has said are going to be the winners in the end. And you have basically all these transactions happening on layer twos. Do you guys see a future for the layer ones that currently exist today, like Solana, like Avalanche, like Phantom?
I think that one thing that I feel like people talk about it all the time, but very few people are actually addressing it is like interoperability. And I don't, if we have this internet of blockchains, how are they going to communicate with each other? And so I think that the ecosystems that solve a particular issue and focus on have that ability are going to survive. Like Polkadot or Cosmos, for example, serve very specific purposes. Right? Like to be able to communicate with other blockchains in that ecosystem. To things like XCM or XCMP for Polkadot, for example. We see a lot of people focusing on the trilemma, right? Like security, throughput, and decentralization. But they're trying to be the Google or Amazon and just dominate. And I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think that we're going to at some point, all these blockchains are going to have the same capacity. They're all going to scale. They're all going to have throughput. They're all going to have security. And the ones that have the best developer and end user experience and ultimately are secure enough are the ones that people will build on. And for different use cases, right? Like you would probably wouldn't want to build a DeFi primitive on Solana that has billions and billions of dollars of TVL because it just doesn't have that level of security and battle tested yet, right? You want to build that on Ethereum right now. But if you're building like a metaverse environment where you want your assets to be transferred like from one to another and you want that full interoperability, you want to be on a network that has native interoperability built in. Like bridges have been highly exploited in the past. And so like thinking that, and maybe this problem gets solved, the bridge problem, but for now, this is where majority of the hacks and exploits have taken place on these highly centralized, very unsecure bridges. So I think that as long as the layer ones have an attractive use case that differentiates itself from something else, they will survive and be important. I'm just not sure about the ones that are trying to completely dominate and are building in an isolated environment.
I think that's beautifully put, Kyle. Like there's tech and then there's people, and you can have whatever tech you want, but we're still also hurtling towards adoptions on various chains. And even if the tech sucks, if people are there, they're going to stay there. Not to say Solana sucks, but they're the NFT king. I mean, there's so many NFT projects on Solana, and people just say, well, the network goes down from time to time. Big deal. And others are like, that's horrifying. That should never even exist. But the fact is, there's millions and millions of people out there using it, buying Solana phones and buying Solana shoes. So we can have that argument about, or not even an argument, but we can talk about who is providing those solutions and becoming the Google of Web3 or whatever. But at the end of the day, people vote with their feet and they vote with their money. And they're going to vote in all kinds of crazy corners of the internet and crazy different blockchains, and keeping things alive based upon community more than even the technology behind it.
Yeah, I think Peter, Kyle, you make great points there as well, because what people forget is that you're right. Not everybody's going to be the Amazon or the Google or, of this industry, right? This is a relatively new, very new asset class still. And there are so many market sectors that need blockchains of all kinds, whether they're public or private or enterprise, it doesn't matter. And I do think that all of these competing quote unquote layer ones, some will go away, as we know, and the ones that survive, and especially Web3 and beyond environment where, obviously everything's about multi-chain, cross-chain interoperability and not to deviate too far, are the ones that are going to work together, because at the end of the day, there are still human beings behind this that have to have business sense, have to have, understanding of, financial ecosystem on a global scale, and have to see where their chains interplay with one another. Because, like you said, you can build the best tech in the world, but if you have human beings that don't understand that behind it and can't interact with other human beings, that's how business runs. So that's just my 2 cents on it.
So we have an audience member with this who's had his hand up for a while. Yusuf, if you have something to add or a question to ask, go for it, brother.
Hey, how are you? I just wanted to add on. I think someone mentioned they were saying about taxable income, especially when it comes to crypto mining. But one thing that wasn't mentioned is even though people are saying like there's a benefit to proof of stake, that it's not it's benefit to proof of work that coins are not taxed. Even though in the U.S. now they're basically treated as capital gains tax, that when you mine coins you only pay once sold. Countries like the UK, and there's a couple other countries that I can't think of the top of my head, they basically make you complete basically a form. So those mined coins are taxed and treated as income tax. And I believe there was like a Senate talk not long ago that discussed the same thing, that in the US, that mined coins will be treated as income tax. So you will have to pay income tax, not capital gains tax. But that means mined coins will be treated as income tax. So that isn't really a benefit compared to proof of stake. Another thing I would like to mention is if you're going to refer to the complexity of being a validator, a sole validator, compared to just pool staking, right? It's also applicable. The same thing's applicable to mining pools, because if you're solo mining, you would need a much larger miner on most chains if you want to be hitting those blocks and be making more. Because if you're like a small solo miner, you'll be making a lot less compared to joining some of these mining pools. So really, you're incentivized to join a mining pool, even if you're mining Bitcoin, such as like Poolin, Slush Pool, etc. And also the complexity to solo mine is much higher than just downloading Hive OS if you're using GPU mining or ASIC mining and just joining one of these pools. So like some of these arguments can be applied to both sides, if you know what I mean.
Sure, and I'm not too sure about the tax laws, so thank you for breaking that out for us. But the point I was trying to make earlier when I was talking about rewards with respect to Bitcoin versus Ethereum, or proof of work versus now proof of stake, was that with proof of work, when you mine a certain amount of Bitcoin, even if you're a big mining pool, you need to dump a relatively significant amount of that to cover costs, right? Like the costs are much higher than simply spinning up an Ethereum validator or staking with a service like Lido. So someone with a lot of Ethereum could stake their Ethereum as a validator or with Lido, and all the rewards that they're earning are going back into the staking pool, right? So the distinction is that with proof of work, there's Bitcoin being dumped on the market and more evenly distributed than with Ethereum, where the rewards are just going to be, the rewards are going to continue to be hoarded and restaked back into the user's node or validator.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think they make a good point there, but that's also, we're assuming all that in a bear market right now, where it's, it's more cost effective to stake and earn rewards, right, and earn passive income. Second, and that's what I was alluding to before. Second, a bull market hits again, and Ethereum goes back up 3, 4K, 5K, whatever it does this next bull run. You're going to see a lot of people exit out of staking, right, for their 4% annual rewards and start trading because they're going to make a much higher percentage. So I think that does balance out. I know what you're getting at there. I think it does balance out. And yeah, speaking as a tax attorney in this industry for the last 7 years, the laws are all over the place based on domicile, and they're always in flux, even in the U.S. I mean, we have the Tezos case going on right now with ongoing with staking rewards that they've won their suit against the IRS, and it's now in federal court. So, everybody's holding their breath to see what goes on with that, whether it's going to be capital gains or income or what variety, what flavor of property they come down and adjudicate it as. Who the hell knows, right? So that's an ongoing separate conversation that we can have hours-long debate on as well. On it, your mining rewards on it. Whereas, but even proof of stake, you're not going to sit there and get a 4% yearly reward when the token that you are staking may go up 100, 200, 300%. You're going to sell, right? A lot of people have different investment goals. A lot of people have different, lifestyle goals, right? And you're not going to sit there and stake if you want to take 100% gain and retire early if you have a sizable amount of ETH or something like that. So just it's counterbalancing forces there for sure.
Amen. So, go ahead, Yusuf.
Oh, sorry. Just one thing I wanted to mention. Another benefit of the proof of stake, if you're looking on the economic side, is like you said, with normal mining, a lot of it would be offloaded to cover costs. But what makes proof of stake more resilient to downturns is, let's say there's like some short-term bad news. I want to say I can't think of examples. Maybe not like Solana, their blockchain holds, but let's say there's a hack on Ethereum, right? Due to the unbonding period, like 20-day unbonding period with staking, most people, if they compound stake, then they won't be able to dump all their Ethereum, especially those people who put all their ETH into staking. So it's more resilient towards volatility. So some people might see that as a good thing, that during periods of bear markets or downturns or short shocks, that is more resilient compared to something like Bitcoin, where all the people are mining, they're basically hoarding these Bitcoin in their ledgers, and if something wrong happens, they can just offload them on exchanges relatively fast.
Yusuf, you're trying to mess up the buy the dip opportunities, brother. This is like favorite thing about FUD.
Of course. But at the same time, it's also a good thing because if you can compound stake, but you can't really compound mine, right? Because with ETH, you stake, you earn that staked amount, you can put back into staking. And as someone who mines a lot myself, if I make money from mining, buying more rigs and sending them up is a pain in the ass. So I'm like, I'll just hoard it rather than compound mine, if that makes sense.
I never really saw it that way, Yusuf. That actually gave me a different perspective on it that I've never thought about before. So, audience member, rather panelists, and Yusuf, I consider you now part of the panel. Do you guys foresee a future where Ethereum's market cap gets very close to Bitcoin's, if not flips Bitcoin's?
I mean, in my own opinion, it really depends on future market trends, because like we've seen in the past, it really depends on what is trending. Like we've had, I'm a big believer in cycles are dictated by whatever is trending at the moment. Now we're in the whole metaverse cycle where everyone's talking about metaverse. There was a yield farming cycle, a DeFi cycle, a smart contract cycle. If in the future we come back to smart contract being very important, and like Bitcoin holds its value, of course, it's like the grandfather of cryptos, the first crypto. If you have your funds in Bitcoin, you're safe. Ethereum, now they moved to proof of stake. It's more like it's more unreliable, but at the same time, it's Ethereum, right? It's the most reliable smart contract network. If smart contracts become more widely used in the future outside of just the crypto space, maybe in traditional finance and banking and retail, then I can see Ethereum coming close to Bitcoin market cap or overtaking it. But at the same time, the crypto space in general is still relatively small. A lot of things can change. Like the whole crypto market, even at the all-time high, was like $2 to $3 trillion. If you compare that just to gold, right, like a commodity, gold itself is just $10 trillion. So crypto is still relatively new, even though it has a lot of social media attention. There's still a lot of room for growth. So it really depends on what people value more as an asset. Do they value an immutable asset like Bitcoin, or something with more utility like Ethereum?
I I personally don't think that Ethereum will flip Bitcoin. I know that a lot of people do, but the fact is that Bitcoin is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is king, and Bitcoin is the only store of value. And if we have bigger blocks, it could be actually peer-to-peer digital currency like Satoshi wanted, but unfortunately Blockstream got involved, fucked that all up, and forced us into like Lightning Network. But that's I was gonna say that's like a whole other topic, but actually that is the topic that we're supposed to be talking about.
Yeah,
But
Kyle,
I
if
guess
you don't mind elaborating on that, I'd actually love to learn more about that at a high level, at least.
yeah, so so there's a lot of theories around kind of like Bitcoin maximalists who aren't part of like the core dev teams anymore, that felt like Blockstream intentionally wanted to keep the block size limited so that Lightning Network could become primitive in the space, right? Like they were, and this is the whole block size debate was like, oh yeah, no, we need to keep the block small so that everyone can run nodes and it can be super decentralized. And we will create a layer 2 on Bitcoin that will allow us to do like cheaper transactions, super fast and super cheap. But then you turn into like a very hyper centralized network, right? Like Lightning is not decentralized, and really that's going to be dominated by big players who want to run the channels. So so really, like a lot of people think that the entire block debate was dominated by people who were looking to make profit on Lightning Network, and and so anyway, like so that's a shame, right? Like, and I think most people who I respect in the space that are like really intelligent developers, Vitalik himself, also, and I'm pretty sure if like, well, I'm not gonna Satoshi. I have a 50-50 on who Satoshi is, right? Like I think he's like this benevolent superhero that's either dead or alive or something like that, or potentially the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Vanguards, like the people who've always controlled the money supply. Potentially saw. I also made a video about this on my YouTube channel. Like if any of you guys are interested in learning more about that I would say conspiracy that I have theorized potentially, but it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. But regardless, back to the point of like Ethereum flipping Bitcoin, I just don't see it happening. There's a lot of competition in the smart contract space. So like let's look at Facebook, right? So Facebook came along and said, we want to become the largest bank in the world, so we're going to create the stable coin that's backed by a basket of different commodities, and we want to make sure the thing is secure, right? Like, and so they looked at Ethereum and said, well, Solidity is a really shitty smart contract language. There's like a bunch of vulnerabilities, I think 27 or something known vulnerabilities from the smart contract language of Solidity, and therefore like we cannot become a global reserve currency like Libra and then DM wanted to do using Solidity. And so they then put a bunch of money, like $1 billion of R&D, into creating Move, right? New smart contract language that now Aptos and Sui are using. So like there's problems on Ethereum other than scalability. Security is one of them. And like if Facebook didn't feel like they were to be secure creating their world reserve currency using Solidity, and they needed to make a new, more secure smart contract language, that probably tells us something, right? So my point is that is that there's a lot of competition in the smart contract space. So there's not any competition in the world reserve currency digital gold space. And now that Ethereum is proof of stake, it is even less unique. And everything that Ethereum wants to become, Polkadot already is. Yeah. So like, if you look at the architecture for Ethereum 2.0, it literally is just like what Polkadot already is. So I don't think it's going to become a reserve or flip Bitcoin. In fact, I think it'll become diluted over time as more dominant, like Silicon Valley backed smart contract platforms come into the spotlight. Like it's just massive money and momentum behind this whole move ecosystem, which is the smart contract language for Aptos and Sui.
I think the only counter to that, Kyle, and those are all great points, is that you're right. Ethereum faces a lot more competition, but it also enjoys kind of a wider market in terms of adoption. You know, Bitcoin is something people just and institutions buy to participate in and hold. Whereas if we see, you know, every centralized bank and every Nike, Facebook, Adidas, everything else adopting smart contracts, you can imagine a world in which Ethereum, as like for now, the like OG smart contract adopter, just like takes off like a shot and then pulls back over time as more and more blockchains emerge to compete with it, and then you know, its market share goes down. I think the more kind of interesting question for me, or at least the easier question to answer, is like, which one is more likely to exist in 500 years? I mean, Bitcoin, I think, wins that going away. You know, Ethereum and all of its competitors, like anything can happen to them and they can fall out of fad. But Bitcoin is just, you know, everybody's going to agree it's the OG. It created the revolution, and therefore over time, you know, if we have a long time horizon, the market cap is going to be way higher. But would there be some kind of short term kind of situation where Ethereum and even some others flip Bitcoin for a minute? I wouldn't be shocked.
And not to mention that Bitcoin has been the the pinnacle of every hacker in the world trying to attack the network for the past 13 years, and they haven't succeeded till today. Not to say that it couldn't happen in the future, but it's the most battle tested kind of thing. And Ethereum was on the same path, and now we're in this new experimental kind of thing where we have no idea what could happen. Literally, like I keep coming up with this example where a malicious actor could, you know, create a new Lido that has way more attractive APY put onto it. People are going to flock to that, and you know, they can attack the network. That's one way, for example. But we also don't know the security of proof of stake yet. Right? It's never been battle tested on a large scale.
Joe, Wyatt, do you have some closing thoughts for our audience members?
Well, I want to thank everyone for being here, and I'm really thankful to be here. Thanks for having me. It's been really great just to just chat about just what's going on, and you know, if you guys are interested about you know, some of that parallel consensus stuff, come check out Constellation and HTTP and the Tesselation repo, and you can see some of that stuff happening right now.
And can you repeat what you said, Noah, for me? Sorry, my phone just...
No worries. I was just saying, you have some... I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. I know that you all are very busy, and with the spaces kind of closing in on the end, I wanted to know if you had any closing thoughts for our audience members and panelists.
Well, I mean, yeah, thanks for everybody coming today. It's a really lively, spirited debate. It's great to get... you guys are a very knowledgeable panel. It's always great to have people in the industry that, first of all, know what the hell they're talking about, right? And second, aren't trying to shill garbage. So thanks for that to everybody here. And, you know, always love these conversations because, you know, you always get some perspectives and something you didn't think of, you know, because obviously everybody talks about the merge from a different perspective, different angle. You know, when I see it from the operating a crypto exchange as well as from the mining perspective. So, you know, I look at it from two different ends, as well as a legal perspective, really, for what I do. And it's always interesting to get, like I said, your guys' perspective. So thanks very much. And the audience, thank you for hanging in there and having a really good hour with a lot of great information dropped. So thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Kyle.
I'm pretty sure I said everything that I have to say. Like, yeah, pretty disappointed by the whole the move process. It really it's like, I think Ethereum had already dominated its position as a smart contract platform, the most secure one in the world. how, and I'm sure they thought about this, but I forget what was the guy's name. There was one of the Ethereum core developers that was interviewed. I forget his name, but I mentioned it in my video where I talk about the potential attack on Ethereum as a proof of stake blockchain. And he was one that brought it to my attention that like this is pretty dangerous, and it so yeah, I guess like this all it goes back to the entire block size debate, and I do feel that that there has been existential forces that didn't have our best interests in mind, who have forced these changes, like small block sizes, and the switch to proof of stake, not with our best interests in mind, but with their best interests in mind, meaning that like more powerful forces than any of us on this talk right now. It's definitely making me look for other consensus mechanisms or other things that other ways to secure blockchains. I as a VC and a builder, we're building at Master Ventures. We're building a lot of different products and advise a lot and work with a lot of different people building things. There are some really interesting consensus mechanisms coming up that deal with like randomization of node selections and things like that make it really, really hard in a proof of stake model to attack a network. Like Sharding, for example, which is going to roll out soon, has a really cool like randomization selection of the nodes who actually select a block. And so I think that like when it comes down to the smart contract platforms, the thing is that yeah, at this point it's a wide open game right now, and we have no idea who's going to be the dominant contract platform. I don't think there will be one dominant one, but probably several, and yeah, I'm really interested to see which one is, and I think that's why we see so much money that pour into layer ones and layer zeros, because we don't have that decisive kind of understanding yet of who will take reign or who will dominate that space. Yeah, and so this is back to the whole Ethereum merge. It kind of widened up that opportunity, and yeah, I think there's that for anyone listening, that does give us an opportunity to look at who's coming to the space, who's innovating, and with that being said too, we do have to understand that the best tech doesn't always win, right? So like you need marketing awareness, commercial team, business development, and ultimately you need to make a really nice ecosystem for the end users who want to be there. I think like one of the interesting things about things like Polkadot, for example, that allow the app developers to build things like gasless transactions are really interesting. If you're building a dApp on Ethereum, for example, you don't have the ability to eliminate the gas from the end user, and that really creates a barrier of entry and a friction point for new users coming into the Web3 space. Like that, I don't remember if you guys remember trying to use a dApp for the first time, and like you have this dApp token, plus you have to use ETH for gas, and then you're thinking, what is Gwei? And then like this is all quite complex and prohibitive for new people coming in. So things that allow people to spin up new blockchains for application specific purposes are very interesting, and I think people should take a look at those.
I will say that I'm like you, Kyle, whereas I'm not a techie and I don't know enough, and I've just been digging and digging to learn more. But I'm trying to understand whether or not Ethereum's future vision, ultimate vision, would have been possible had they not switched to proof of stake, right? With all the sharding and the scaling, and their ultimate plan for mass adoption, would that have been possible under the previous proof of work consensus mechanism? I still don't have a concrete answer, and I suppose we'll get that answer sometime down the line as proof of work becomes more or less battle tested with respect to Ethereum.
Yusuf might have the answer.
Yusuf might have the answer. Yusuf, go for it, brother.
I mean, sharding has been tested on multiple other blockchains, all of them proof of stake. I'm not quite particularly sure if sharding is possible on proof of work blockchains, but I'm pretty sure it isn't, just because of how the splitting of the shards works. It uses basically delegators rather than miners. But basically, the whole situation is just the scalability trilemma. You're trying to essentially increase scalability while keep decentralization on the low, and we've seen many examples of easily increasing scalability while incorporating centralizations. We have, Solana and HBAR, right? Like, those are good examples of very fast chains. However, there are a lot of aspects of centralization. So I would like to see how ETH goes. They managed to have, like, they said they were projecting 100,000 TPS. If they managed to do that and incorporate sharding while keeping their current mainly decentralized approach, I'll be very impressed. I'm also a very avid DOT investor like Kyle, I believe. But one issue with DOTs is they're only able to support 100 parachain slots, and they still are. Cosmos is better for basically interacting within the Cosmos ecosystem, as the bridges are more usable. But there's a lot of centralized aspects when it comes to Cosmos, and also Cosmos is a lot less secure. Like we saw, I was actually talking around 20 minutes ago about Osmosis, and apparently Osmosis is down again. The Osmosis is a nightmare to use. Polkadot, however, even though they have issues interoperability, Polkadot is an incredibly safe blockchain. It's like Ethereum level of safe. However, it incorporates parachains and fees on their own blockchains. But at the same time, 100 slots isn't enough. You can't just have 100 tokens on a single network. And the current auction system in Polkadot is ridiculous. You have like people paying millions of dollars just to be a part of the smart contract platform. So really, it'll be interesting to see in the next 2 years how this goes down. Because for me, I just want to see a chain that's decentralized and scalable, because that's the whole thing. Because I'm not interested in very highly scalable chains that are centralized. It's the same thing like Visa and Fiat to me. I'm not interested in that. Like, if you look at HBAR and everyone's talking about Hashgraph infrastructure, like, it's literally a company. HBAR is run by a company with a board, and they profit off every transaction. I want to see. That's why I'm interested in Ethereum, because Ethereum has kept a very decentralized approach, and they're trying to. They claim they want to reach 100,000 TPS. I don't know if that's possible, but if they do with sharding, I'll be very impressed, especially if they keep this level of decentralization they are at now.
There's a couple of things I want to say before we tap out on that note. One, I just came up. I've been researching the Move smart contract ecosystem quite a bit the past few weeks, and by doing so, I just came across this Star coin, which is they're calling it enhanced proof of work. And so the question is really, like, is sharding necessary, right? Like, and this goes back to the same kind of thing that I brought up before. If you can create bigger blocks in faster block times, like, do you need to shard? And that's something that I don't have the answer to, but it's just a question that I have not had answered yet. Another thing too is in the Polkadot ecosystem, Yusuf. There's a couple things to take in consideration. So, like, you're not building 100 parachains isn't 100 dApps, right? Like, you think Moonbeam, for example, is a smart contract platform with hundreds of dApps being built on that one parachain. And now you have, if you look at Polkadot's new roadmap, asynchronous backing will increase throughput on the Polkadot network between 100,000 to 1 million transactions per second. And this is something that's rolling out quite soon. So you have, like you said, one of the most secure smart contract platforms in the world that actually could probably host, I would guess, tens of thousands of applications being built on top of it. And additionally, I think it's still theoretical, but there's this idea of nested parachains, nested relay chains, essentially, which is like connecting another relay chain. And this is how Gavin kind of proposed that it would scale in the future, is you essentially create a new relay chain, which, if you're comparing the architecture to ETH 2.0, it's the same as a beacon chain. But you would create a new relay chain that's connected by a parachain to the main relay chain. And this is kind of like, how they plan on scaling in the future beyond 100 parachains. Plus, you have parathreads, right? Parathreads are like going to be your pay-as-you-go transactions for other blockchains to be created that want to connect and want to share security, but maybe don't have a tremendous amount of transactions being processed. So I think that that's one thing to take consideration, is like is just the fact that you're not bound to 100 applications. You're bound to 100 layer one blockchains all in one ecosystem.
Beautifully put, Kyle. Peter, any closing thoughts before we wrap things up?
Sure. A lot of that was like you said, beautifully put and tough to understand. I just want to talk about something I do understand, which is tomatoes. Tomatoes are seasonal. They grow in late August and early September in upstate New York and New Jersey. That's when you should be getting tomatoes. But we have a system in the United States and across the world where tomatoes are grown in Florida and other climates where they're not suitable, just so people can satisfy their need to get tomatoes whenever they want them, because people are greedy, and that's the society we live in. So as blockchains evolve to various means of allocating resources and stuff, let's be mindful of those entities that are trying to create need when there is none, and create markets where there shouldn't be any markets. Let's keep an eye out for things where, like, maybe things have good tech but just aren't fulfilling a need, and are thereby increasing inefficiency and creating a system where we're not really allocating resources efficiently. In my view, blockchain technology has the possibility to create meaningful, responsible allocations across economies, and that's why I like it. But as we're looking at this proof of work and proof of stake thing, we have to keep vigilant for those fraudsters and also centralized startup entities that are seeking VC funding, which are just basically solutions in search of a problem. So that's a long way to say, just be careful out there, do your own research, shop local, don't buy a bunch of plastic crap, and just keep your eyes towards the future.
Also beautifully put, Peter. Whale Coin Talk community, thank you so much for joining today. This was our first virtual roundtable, and in the future, I will definitely refine it more. Maybe we can extend it to be a bit longer, especially when we have guests that give us so many nuggets of information that need unpacking. I feel like even with this spaces, we could have been here for the next 2 hours. But I would love for people to message me with feedback. I hope that this was a learning experience for everyone. I want to thank Peter, Kyle, Joe, Wyatt, Altif, and our special guest, Yusuf, for joining us today. Yusuf, I see your hand up, so I guess Yusuf wants to give us some closing thoughts, and then we can wrap things up.
Sorry for keeping it open too long. Just closing thoughts on what Kyle said is on Polkadot. I completely agree with it. Isn't 100 dApps, it's 100 own chains, but at the same time, it is still limited because it isn't. It isn't consumer friendly. It's more corporation friendly because the whole parachain slot auction is incredibly bad structure because you have these. Only big funds will be able to, be able to pay $80,000, $100,000, $200,000 to be a part of the Polkadot ecosystem, and it's, how it's incredibly hard to be a part of the common good parachains. So the parachain slot auctions are really the only way to participate in Polkadot. And really, what I'm looking for Polkadot is to increase that throughput and for them to increase the amount of parachains that can be part of the Polkadot ecosystem. Because yes, there will be most people will be able to build on the dApps like on Moonbeam, right? But there will also be people who are trying to build layer 1 chains, but they don't have an incredible amount of funding to be part of the Polkadot ecosystem. And because it's an auction structure, you're limited to the time you're available to be part of that. So if you don't raise those funds within a certain amount of time, if you're a smaller corporation, then you won't be able to, or a smaller developer or whatever, you won't be able to be part of the Polkadot ecosystem. So even though Polkadot has incredibly good tech, it isn't as interoperable or scalable as Cosmos for now. But the reason I'm more bullish on Polkadot compared to Cosmos is because of that whole security aspect. Cosmos is way too centralized and too much vulnerabilities compared to Polkadot. Polkadot's like an Ethereum, but with own chains with layer 1s. It's instead of just having a bunch of other ERC20 tokens where you have to pay ETH fees instead of your own native token, which is a big issue. But yeah, that's just my whole issue on the scalability trilemma.
I heard there's a new layer 1 in Polkadot called Hero that's going to save the day.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
I'm just doing a shameless plug. Okay, that's all my thoughts.
Yeah, no worries. And look, guys, I mean, I could follow that up, Yusuf, with asking you and Kyle, and why do you think Polkadot didn't take off the way so many other layer 1s did during the bull market? I know that we're supposed to wrap things up here, but I mean, let's have an encore. Let's hear your thoughts on that.
So I went to Token 2049 in Singapore just got back yesterday, and I had one purpose essentially going there was to go scream at Parity and ask them what the hell they're doing, and they're well aware. So I met with several of the Parity team, and for those of you who aren't aware, Parity is essentially the kind of entity that is creating Polkadot and Kusama, and also Yusuf, to your point, like we still have Kusama, which is a much cheaper and probably as 99% as secure as Polkadot. And so like you have a cheaper, lower barrier to entry in the Kusama network that can like fully run mainnet. And you get like the most recent upgrades there first. And so that there is that kind of thing too, where you now essentially have 200 potential layer ones in that ecosystem, the .som ecosystem. But back to your point, your question is they didn't take off because there was this we face this problem in our industry a lot. Like you have super dev heavy teams that underestimate the value of marketing, right? And then you have blockchains like Solana, which is essentially a testnet, which skyrocketed up to the top 10 or whatever, simply based on marketing alone. And so this is why what I said earlier, the best tech doesn't always win. You have to put a spotlight on your ecosystem, and you have to attract people there and like throw parties and be really cool and like do cool shit. And this is something that Polkadot miserably failed at. And so like I was pleasantly reassured when I went down there and started like opening up a can of whoop ass on the parity team. Like they assured me that they were well aware of this problem of the lack of marketing. And 2 months ago, apparently they completely got rid of the existing marketing team, implemented a new one. And what I got, like, quote, like, we've ripped out the old plumbing, reinstalling the plumbing as of 2 months ago, and are well aware of the problems that we have, the problems we have with adoption and marketing and like growth, and are working on it. This is like, it's a high priority on their list right now. So I expect that probably in the next 2 to 3, 4 months, we're going to see a lot more and hear a lot more about Polkadot. Plus, if you look at the new roadmap that's come out, like I feel like Polkadot has almost been too honest. Like they're the only ones who are actually publishing the like true throughput, right? Like you got Solana, who's marketing tens or hundreds of thousands of TPS, but like it just doesn't process that. It's not true, right? Like that's what's happening. So, and then you got Aptos and Sui, who are like theoretically doing 150,000 transactions per second, but that's like in a perfect world on a test net, and like it's not real. So Polkadot has just been incredibly honest. Now, if you look at the roadmap, the new roadmap that just got released, like there's asynchronous backing, which is now putting out attractive numbers, where Polkadot's doing 100,000 to 1 million transactions per second, and like this is real development. So, when you start putting those things that retail and builders want to see, they want to see high throughput, right? Like they want to make sure that like they're building a game or they're building an exchange that it can process what they needed to process. And so that's simply what it was. Like if you look, like the reason I'm so bullish on Polkadot is because Gavin, who essentially was the CTO of Ethereum when it was built and created Solidity and created all the shit for Ethereum, he built it with Vitalik, and yeah, Charles was there too, but Charles left and is doing his thing now. But like essentially it was Vitalik and Gavin, and then like they built Ethereum as an experiment, and it took off probably beyond their wildest dreams. And then they kind of like looked at it and said, shit, what do we do now? We have to try to scale. This thing's just not built for scale. And so Vitalik stayed back and like worked on Ethereum, which is essentially like remodeling a building while there's still tenants in it. Where Gavin left and said, okay, well now we're going to use Rust, which is like the most robust, secure infrastructure language in the world, which everyone's using, and we're going to build it the way that Ethereum 2.0 wants to be, and we're going to build it future-proof and all that stuff. So this is kind of like, that's my thoughts on that.
I love it, Kyle.
I just want to say I completely agree with what he said when he's talking about the whole infrastructure of Ethereum. It's basically like renting out of the tenant. But also, if you're to answer your question, Will, is basically the reason why DOT hasn't taken off is even though there's a lot of projects with incredibly good tech, one of DOT's things, like Kyle said, it's about them being too honest, but also it's about their tokenomic structure, because most of these chains that don't pay in their native fees. Like, with Ethereum ERC20 tokens basically pay in ETH, and that basically funnels actual demand. But because of DOT and their parachains, there's only 100 parachains. There's a couple of common good chains, and those chains basically pay in their native coins rather than DOT. So you have that aspect taken out. And also, I saw like a post from Masari today that essentially that DOT is most heavily in developers under ETH, and even though there's 100 parachains, that means there's a bunch bunch of devs just for there's 100 parachains. So they're very dev heavy. And like I said, on the marketing side, Dot definitely needs help, because if you look at the original ETH team, we had Hawkinson, which more of the marketing guy, Vitalik, he was like the visionary, but Gavin Wood was basically the tech guy. He was the one who came up with Solidity. And I just think Dot needs more help. They need to find a utility for the actual Dot coin itself, to funnel more demand into the coin, kind of like what Cosmos has done, even though Cosmos also is with native fees. And they also need to funnel up their marketing because currently, Dot has an incredible tech, but it's one of those coins with great tech, not so great marketing.
Yeah, and so, I mean, just to be clear, I wasn't referring to the token price because the token price, it did go up. It did do well in the bull market, but more so in this question, I mean, a lot of these questions were answered, or a lot of this question was answered by PoW, but more so the network itself. I'm talking about TVL. I'm talking about liquidity incentives. I'm talking about being able to seamlessly bridge stuff over the way that people were able to bridge funds over to to Polygon for the liquidity incentives on Aave, to Avalanche's C chain, to Phantom, right? I mean, a lot of these networks, Solana, BNB, of course, Binance Smart Chain, a lot of these networks were getting a lot of love. Token price was going up, of course, as well, but the actual networks were getting a lot of love, and I didn't see the same thing for Polkadot. In fact, I tried to mess around on a couple. I think towards the end there, I tried to mess around on Akala, and I'm like, the user interface kind of sucks. With Moonbeam as well, I wasn't that impressed.
That's the issue with Dot. Sorry to interrupt you, but that's the issue with Dot because Cosmos is the one for interoperability, but Dot is focusing on security, utilizing parachains. So once it fully gets that out, finishes the development of its parachains, finishes the slot auctions, and then once it increases throughput, then I think we'll see those projects start to develop more, start to get the hang of Dot, increase fix the UI, and basically make the bridges more accessible because you can't really compare Dot to Matic because Matic is just a layer 2. It's very easy to do. There's a bunch of layer 2s, but these are layer 0s. It's an incredibly hard thing to do what Dot and Cosmos are doing. So it will take time because it's new tech. It's kind of like Bitcoin early age. It's a bad comparison, but you get what I mean. New tech calls for bad UI, and then you go a couple of years down the line, and then UI gets resolved with tech. Kind of like if you look earlier domains in 1980 when HTTP first came out. If you look at the original, you had to type in the full IP address. You couldn't just you didn't have Google, you didn't have search engines. And then later down the line, if we'll see Dot has more interoperability similar to what Cosmos has now, but it will have a lot more security compared to Cosmos now and more decentralization. But unfortunately, I have to go now. So thank you everyone for this.
Just for fun, I posted in the comments below here. I posted someone from the parody team actually sent this to me, just making me aware that they're very aware of the problems that they face versus like someone like Cosmos, for example. So you can see this like Virgin Polkadot versus Chad Cosmos little meme that I put in the comments. But yeah, anyway, so they're well aware, and I feel much better after talking to the team in Singapore about the future for Polkadot.
Love to hear that. Again, panelists, everyone, Peter, Kyle, Yusuf, guest appearance, Wyatt, Altif, and Joe. Really appreciate you all being here today. We're certainly going to do more Twitter Spaces in the future, and you all are welcome to join anytime. This was awesome. I learned a lot. I hope everyone else learned a lot, and I hope you guys all have a great week. My name is Noah from Whale Coin Talk, signing out. But before I go, remember that everything you hear on here is for educational purposes only. Nothing is financial advice. Always do your own research, stay safe, and only invest what you're willing to lose. Everyone have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Noah. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.